And along this line of energy that took us from Cortina, an area that's defined as mountainous and remote, to Venice, Rome, and then Europe, the world, to then go back to Cortina. And this is a way in which we start this session. So we've come to the first session of the event that will talk about how to take remote areas, the so-called remote areas, to the 21st century. Before introducing the various guests who will be with us today, I need to apologize because Mr. Federico D'Inca, the Minister for Parliamentary Relations, for institutional reasons, could not be with us today. But luckily, yesterday, I allowed him to record 5 minutes, and he gives us a report. Mr. D'Inca comes from the region, from Belluno. So tell us why digital transformation can be very important for these remote areas in the Belluno province and in Cortina.
Buongiorno Ministro D'Inca, buongiorno Federico.
Good morning, Minister D'Inca. Good morning, Federico. Welcome to Cortina Digital Forum. It's a great pleasure for us, organizers, to have you here with us to talk about a topic which is definitely very close to our hearts, given that we all live in the province of Belluno. And the topic is, how can we give our communities in the remote areas, on the mountain areas, best possibilities and best opportunities? We are going to be talking about today, and we have devoted part of the Cortina Digital Forum on the topic of digitization of remote areas. My first question is that, given that 50% of remote areas in Europe is made by villages and mountain areas, how is the digital important to this extent? And what about Italy and the government? What are they doing right now? Well, first of all, good morning, and thank you very much for this fantastic event, which again, talking about the digital is important when we talk about those territories that are rural and less populated as the province of Belluno. Local areas are at the core of a new development, and also through an ad hoc plan by the Italian government with 200 billion euros for our country. 20% is devoted to the digital infrastructures and technological innovation in more general terms. And this is fundamental to give a new chance for development to the province of Belluno. We have a demographic problem in the province of Belluno. In 2000, we were approximately 220,000 people, less than 200,000 in 2020, with also aging, which is a problem. This is not just a problem of the province of Belluno, but all the alpine regional provinces suffer from this. And this is fundamental to indeed give a new momentum to young people and to provide new opportunities to our companies. And we want to bring the broadband, as you can see around our region. People are digging, and therefore this means that we're actually doing it. And we are going to provide broadband in our province as well. And through the voucher system, we will connect also households to this very important structure. You work in Belluno, but you're connected with the rest of the world, and this is important. We have seen how important it is over the past few months and weeks because people work from home. Yes, and indeed we're going to talk about how the digital is an opportunity. There are, of course, challenges at local levels, but we have wonderful opportunities because our venues, our communities are magnificent, and therefore the digital should be really a launching pad to indeed be able to develop even more our territory. My second question is, we're going to be talking about politics, we're going to be talking about Italy as well as Europe, the vision over the next 20 to 30 years, but we're going to be talking about the industry as well. We need a synergy between politics and civil society, of course. And given that the digital is really even more important after the COVID pandemic, my question to you is that how do you see the future? What about the mixed cooperation between politics, industry, and civil society? We need to cooperate as strictly as possible without entry barriers. We have to have new products, new services for the benefit of citizens. And our five-star movement is actually geared on 2050, when I'm going to be 74. Today I'm 45 years old. My daughter will be a lady by then. And so we have to think in terms of our new generations. And this is our purpose through our next generation EU, also through the European Common Debt. And everything goes through the digital. We have to think in terms of public administration and citizens. Public administration must be smart, intelligent, able to provide services, quick, less red tape and more investments. And we have to speed it up also in terms of our 200 billion euros, which are going to be received over the next few years. Between 19 and 74 years of age, we have digital knowledge and digital skills equal to 42% of our own population. At European level, the percentage is 58 in the same age bracket. In the same age bracket, 17% in Italy of our people do not have a digital knowledge. And this is a gap. And this is a gap that needs to be filled, especially when it comes to our senior citizens, who are the ones most suffering right now. In Italy, after the COVID pandemic, we have tried to relaunch our country. We took away the closed silos. That is, we tried to get rid of doubling or repeating skills, etc. We need to be smarter also within the framework of politics. We have to build up a planning, bearing in mind digital as the basis. We need skills, we need cooperation amongst ministries, and we need a better rapport with our parliament and the ministry by Vittorio Colau or Minister Cingolani, who deals with the ecological transition, but also justice, public administration, transportation, etc. All the ministries must be coordinated together to be able to work at their best. We have turned to applications as well. We want to have a system allowing you to receive resources by the government so that we can actually physically make purchases, we can work on a better level. And on the other hand, what we need to do is to raise up the bar in terms of making purchases more flexible, etc., so that the digital can help us in physical terms as well. In order to achieve this, we not only need cooperation, but also more general skills to give equal opportunities to our young people in Europe so that they can become entrepreneurs, they can work. And this is our ultimate goal. Politics must bear this in mind. Well, that's why our government with Mr. Conte and Mr. Draghi now tried to keep up with this development by launching an ad hoc plan, the PNR, and everyone must roll up our sleeves and cooperate together to bring this country forward. From here to 2050, we'll look back and we will admit that we were able to change our country in such hard years.
Thank you very much, Federico. As a young person, I appreciate a lot what you said, so I guess also other European young people will appreciate this. And in thanking you, I'd like to remind you that you have great support from us, from the European Parliament, from businesses. So I'm sure that out of today's discussion, it will be possible to create new synergies to actually develop the different projects. Thank you very much, Federico, and have a good day. I thank you all. And, well, let's continue with young people at the forefront because we need them. This is an important initiative and it can give light to our territory, which is a difficult territory, but it's also beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Federico. Have a good day. Thank you, and thanks to Federico D'Inca for his report. He's Minister for Parliament Relations of the Draghi government. Federico, we're all here to work for the same type of targets. And so it's with great pleasure that today I'd like to welcome, on behalf of the Cortina Digital Forum, to a series of personalities from the industry, from politics, from Europe and from Italy alike, who have decided to fight for these ideas. So today I have the great pleasure of introducing to you Frank Brogovic, a friend, a member of the European Parliament, and who's also at the head of the Parliamentary Group for Smart Villages. Hello, Frank.
Hello, good morning to everybody to Cortina.
Together with Frank, we have Roger Domenech, who's a deputy of the Italian Republic, member of the Italian Parliament. Roger is responsible for cross-boundary funds, and he'll tell us what they do at the government. Hi, Roger. Good morning, everybody. Let's hope we're going to have interesting proceedings. And then we have a mix between politics and business. And it is here that Mr. Federico D'Inca talked about this. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Annalisa Barbagallo, who works for Alibaba for international and European relations. Thank you very much, Annalisa, for being with us.
Thank you, Alessandra.
And last but not least, I have the pleasure of welcoming Massimiliano Ladovat, who's Chief Technology Officer, CTO of OneWeb. Hi, Massimiliano.
Ciao, Alessandro. Grazie.
Hi, Alessandro. Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. Okay, great. So now we're going to start with a debate that will last about 45 minutes, and we'll talk about how remote areas are, in fact, fantastic areas. The province of Belluno is an example. Cortina is an example of this. But then, obviously, there are wonderful areas in Slovenia, where Frank comes from, in the UK, where Massimiliano is at the moment. Everywhere there are beautiful areas, and 50% of the European territory is made up by what we call non-urban areas, remote areas, mountainous areas, rural areas. And I'd like to start from this point, Frank. In 3 minutes, tell us why you decided to focus on this topic at the European Parliament, and what's the European Parliament vision for these rural areas?
Good morning again, and congratulations for organizing this event. I'm a member of European Parliament from Slovenia. I live in rural areas and I'm also a farmer at home. So I was mayor 13 years, and when I started to be member of European Parliament, I recognized that a lot of things will be changed in a few years. We speak about these big mega trends, about digitalization, urbanization, about climate changes. And in European Parliament 5-6 years ago, we spoke a lot about smart cities concept, which brings solutions for cities. And I decided that I will work on smart villages topics to fulfill this digital gap, which is problematic in the rural areas. So the initiative is around 5 years old, and we work hand in hand by the European Commission, and what is most important, with people all around the Europe, that we will live this concept. What we speak about in this concept, we speak about first how to connect rural areas with quality broadband connection. We saw in COVID crisis how important it is. Now everybody recognized how important is e-learning, e-commerce, telework and other things, and we need good connectivity. Then when we have good connectivity and all other infrastructure in rural areas which we need, and the building of this infrastructure is also supported by European Union, we need jobs in rural areas, and we need jobs of 21st century. And these jobs are not only in agriculture, this is a very important topic, precision farming, other things, but we speak also about mobility in rural areas. We speak about energy sector in rural areas. We speak about SMEs in rural areas. Also social things like e-health, like care for elderly people, tourism, what is very important for such a great and nice places like you have in Cortina and other things. And now it's important that we do this on different level. As I said, I am RUMRA and Smart Villages Intergroup Chair. We work on European level. It's important that we work this on national level and that we will involve the solutions for rural areas in next strategy on the base of the funding, which will arrive also from European Union. We can speak about Regional Development Fund, Rural Development Fund, and also many other like Social Fund. We can speak also about Recovery and Resilience Fund. And now it's time that people on government level, on national and regional level, prepare good strategies for this. And what is important, to involve people and bring skills to them.
Thank you very much, Frank. You're right. We must all be committed to reach this target, and the digital can be a necessary tool to actually reach this goal, maybe by 2030, if not earlier than that, by 2025. Now, before leaving the floor to MP Roger Domenech, I'd like to remind you all that you can ask questions through the platform, and then later on we will start a general debate for the speakers who are here today. And at the same time, I'd like to send you a task. There are hundreds and hundreds of people connected to the platform, so I ask you to carry out a task. I would like to ask you, which is, in your opinion, the #1 challenge for these rural areas? It could be one single term, a couple of words, a sentence, and then maybe we will comment the results of this task I'm sending you. And now, Roger, what is your point of view? You're an MP, you're a member of parliament, and you live in one of the 3 mountainous regions in Italy. But you went to Rome and you had to relate to more urban areas. How can we talk about mountainous areas, and how can digital help the revival of mountainous areas?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, and thank you, Alessandro, for this interesting question and for having invited me to take part in this discussion. I have really lived through all this, also in terms of my political background and experience. And my personal life is very similar to that of Frank's. I start with a job which is very much connected to the environment, and then I became mayor of a village and then a member of the parliament. Since 2013 to date, the approach to rural areas and mountainous areas has profoundly changed. In Italy as well as in the rest of Europe. Syntax is important and jargon is important, of course. I joined the parliament 8 years ago, and they used to talk about remote and disadvantaged areas. Today, these areas have changed name, and they become one of the pivotal points for economic recovery, especially following this pandemic. We are within the framework of a large context, large investments in Europe, the so-called Italian plan, as we have it here in Italy, but countries such as Spain, for instance, devote more than 10 billion euros to fight against demographic problems in non-urban areas. There is a good proportion in terms of much money being devoted to very few people in these areas. And the digital is really fundamental if you want to keep the connection, mobility between people and things, between urban and non-urban areas. Why I say this relationship is inversely proportional. Since the past war to not long ago, we invested our resources into big cities. Today, in 2015, with the ad hoc plan in Italy for the digital, we devoted €500 million in terms of broadband in those white areas, that is, the remote areas. It was brought to 35 billion. We had more investment in the province of Belluno, which is my home region. The foreign investments were concentrated where there were most densely populated areas. Now the situation has changed, and this is one of the most important challenges because we need to keep these areas connected to fight against the urbanization of people living in this area. So I'm very confident under this respect because I see that both in Italy and Europe, this is really a core discussion, and we can do something to guarantee to set up this network, and together with public policies, therefore with more investments into remote areas, you indeed need also the willingness by the big private players to cooperate. And that's why the Cortina Digital Forum is particularly important today to talk about all this. Thank you very much indeed for your vision. I also saw you smiling when you talked about cooperation and European areas, because we're not just talking about a regional issue, an Italian issue, but we're talking about something that really touches upon all European citizens. And with great pleasure, I'd like to introduce you to Mrs. Annalisa Barbagallo, who's the head of European relations for Alibaba. Annalisa, I would start from this question. Why is it that a multinational organization such as Alibaba, which is ranking amongst the first 10 in the world in terms of sales, etc., why is it that Alibaba deems it important to make investments into less populated areas, but which anyhow in Europe account for approximately 20% of our GDP? So it's big. It's 1/5 of the European GDP.
Thank you, Alessandro, and thanks for the invitation again. At Alibaba, we have a mission to make it easier to do business anywhere. So I would really stress the anywhere to answer your question, because we think that digitalization can really improve living conditions and contribute to social and economic development in rural areas. I would like to give you some examples of our experience in our home market in China, in Southeast Asia, and also in Italy. So particularly with reference to e-commerce, in our home market of China, 40% of the population lives in remote and rural areas. So we're talking here about 500 to 600 million people. And what we see today is that e-commerce in this area is growing at a faster pace than in urban areas. So we're talking about 30% growth yearly versus 20% versus 24%. Why is that? That is the result of several years of investments and initiatives by the public and private sector, specifically targeting communities in rural areas. So connectivity and physical infrastructure are obviously very important preconditions, but just as important, there are initiatives on education, on training, support for administrative tasks, logistical support, access to finance. And what we see now, and I would like to link to some of the points that have been raised earlier on, is a very positive trend of reverse migration of highly skilled workers moving back from urban areas to their rural hometowns. We set up 2 programs that specifically target these areas. We have Taobao Villages, a program that started in 2009 when we saw the emergence of clusters of e-commerce villages across China. Obviously, the concept of clusters will sound very familiar to our hosts in Veneto. What we now have is thousands of villages that we support with specific digital tools, education, training, AI. There are now thousands of these villages, and these villages run around 2.96 million online shops. A recent study carried out by the World Bank and Alibaba has also shown that household income in these villages is 3 times that of other rural villages and is on a par with household income in urban areas. That is, of course, an extremely important development. We also have a program that supports farmers in rural areas. We started in 2014 with this program really to familiarize farmers with using the internet and e-commerce. And now it's a fully fledged program that supports them with tools, but also with training in the latest marketing techniques. For example, live streaming, which is very popular in China. And we support farmers stream live their produce or their fish from their farms, and also with logistical support. Logistical support has been also the core of our focus during the pandemic in Southeast Asia, where we worked with the government in Malaysia in particular to identify and overcome some of the bottlenecks that during the first lockdown were stopping farmers getting their produce to their urban consumers. And then finally, let me just say a few words about our work in Italy, which is a very important market, very important export market globally for Alibaba. We have a number of different streams of cooperation with the Italian government. With the Ministry of Agriculture, we work to protect some of our excellencies in agri-food, for example, the DOC and DOPS and the Prosecco and Parmigiano Reggiano. With the Italian trade agencies, we have several cooperation agreements to support the export of Italian SMEs on our global platforms. And I'm very happy to report that on our main shopping holiday, what we call 11/11 Singles Day, Italian companies have actually been making sales for over 380 million euros, and that is on one day in 2020. So finally, to conclude, we really think that there is a business interest for companies to invest in rural and remote areas. There are enormous possibilities that digitalization opens up to communities in these areas, and that with public and private support, we can really work towards the end of a better society and of an internet that is inclusive for all.
We have indeed a need to be supported by everyone. And Annalisa, you said it really well. And I would conclude this first round of comments with Massimiliano, and then to get to the core of our discussion. Then, Massimiliano, to you, in just a couple of minutes, can you tell us more about OneWeb and what does space mean for the digital, in digital terms, so to say? Because we're going to be talking about a number of interesting things and how space is the new frontier for the digital and for the non-urban areas. Well, thank you very much, Alexandro, for having invited me here at this event, because whatever we do and whatever we have been doing over the past few years is really the reason why OneWeb exists. We want to connect everyone, especially those who are not connected, and fill up the digital gap. There is a constellation of approximately 200 satellites, and every month we're launching into the space 36 of them. And at the end of this year, we should become operational, fully operational. And therefore, we are bringing a fast solution to the issue of remote areas and their connection. What we want to do is be able to connect every single village. I've heard people talking about smart villages. So we want to connect every single village in Italy and in Europe and in all rural areas with a limited investment. We know that fiber is definitely a solution, but there are some areas, unfortunately, that require time, very big investments, if compared to an investment that just having a terminal worth just a few thousand euros and be able to connect all villages all around Europe and the world. Our target is really to be able to connect all the schools in the world. We have 350 million young people, believe it or not, between 15 and 24 without connection. They cannot get connected in the world, and we want to contribute to solve this issue. The numbers that you mentioned, 100 million people in Europe living in rural areas, means once more that there are several ways of finding a solution to the issue of connectivity. OneWeb is one, I feel, of the possible solutions. And it is a solution which is accessible over the next few months. We're not talking about a long-term solution, a solution to be found in 10 years from now, etc. This is the solution which is available now. Over the past 5 years, we worked in terms of trying really to fill up this gap, so to say. And this is something that motivates us. All our OneWeb teams are working towards this target. We really want to connect everyone. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Massimiliano. And this is a good clue for both Frank and Rosa. I believe that one of the most interesting things about OneWeb is that you act in partnership with the British government, and therefore a cooperation between the public and the private sectors can bring about true innovation. So, before giving the floor back to Frank, I really would like you to take into consideration also the comments by the public. Our question was, what is the biggest challenge for the remote areas? Let's see the result.
Here we go. Transportation, connectivity, services, access are the main answers. So, Frank, I'd start from here, and I would ask you, you talk about smart villages. You talk about smart villages in Europe, but obviously we need to talk about them also in local areas. Are these small villages based on the development of communities? Of course so, because civil society plays an important role. But how can we develop these smart villages? What is the European Parliament doing in this respect? And then, how can we provide services, transport, connectivity? How can these smart villages change the life of our people living in rural areas?
Yeah, thanks, Alessandro. As I said, it's very important that if we spoke about smart villages a few years ago on European level more than on local level or regional level, national level, I think it's very important that now this debate will be among people. And what is the most important, we know that in next 10 years, many things will be changed. And rural areas must be part of these changes. It means there must be projects to prepare people for these changes, and also to prepare projects to use a big amount of money which will be invested in European Union in next decade. As you saw, mobility, transport, this is one very important topic. You have, for example, Uber in cities, but you don't have Uber in rural areas because there is no business case. And what is very important, it's in this smart villages concept, usually we speak about people. And we must prepare solution, not solution that will bring back, I don't know, millions of dollars or euros, but how we will solve the problems of people. And we saw here connectivity, as we heard, from satellites to optical fibers, different technology for different places. It's necessary to find this solution in rural areas for mobility. For example, in Slovenia, we have one very good platform, Co-Traveler, with which, in cooperation with volunteers, usually students or young retired people, municipalities which buy cars, we ensure transport mobility free for people older than 65 years in rural areas. And this is the part of this social innovation, not only technical innovation. And usually we must know that digitalization is tool, but we must solve the problems of people. And here it's very important that people are involved, that we share these good experiences which are in many countries, in European Union, European Network for Rural Development. They prepared many good practices, and that's important that people start to think about this, that we prepare these projects and that we find solutions. As I said, in agriculture, precision farming, what was also very good in COVID crisis, connection between producers and consumer. Very few new platforms started in COVID crisis. As I said, there are other solutions which are connected with tourism. Unfortunately, COVID stopped it, but it will be very important to be connected, to have these reservation systems and other things. And it's very important that we go from these big words to very practical solution that people will understand. And for example, I made more than 30 roundtables all around the Slovenia, and we showed good practices. And what was big surprise, in each municipality we have something to show what we can title smart villages solutions. Thank you.
Fantastic, Frank. It is exactly out of those best practices that we should start from, not big words, but best practices. And from here, we then continue with Roger Demenech to talk about language. I mean, words have an important meaning. But before leaving it to Roger, I'd like to go back to Annalisa. When we talk about best practices, Annalisa, what are we talking about? Why and how do we get to those best practices? Because I know that Alibaba in Southeast Asia has practices that aren't even particularly difficult to manage and which instead gave great results. Can you give us an overview of what Alibaba is doing there and how, in the interest of Frank, who's been Minister for Agriculture and the Environment in Slovenia before becoming an MP at the European Parliament, could there be a link with him? Can we really discuss how we together can bring about digital to be a real change for these areas?
Yes, thank you, Alessandro. Yeah, absolutely. I think we have a lot of relevant examples, and I saw the focus on transportation, on logistics, on connectivity, particularly with respect to transportation and logistics. We think there's a lot that private companies can do with the support from public authorities. I would like to stress this. It's not just national government, it's also local, regional government that can really help solve the issues for rural communities. These issues normally, we normally talk about the last mile. In this case, we're talking about the last mile, but we're actually talking about the first mile, particularly when we're looking at farmers that want to export their produce or their fish, their meat to urban areas. And in difficult conditions where we need to keep the cold chain, is really important to make investment in this first mile and to ensure that the chain is not broken. So we have experience, as you were saying, in both in China and in Southeast Asia. I was mentioning before the work that we've done, particularly at the start of the COVID pandemic, and really that has been an experience where we've really sat down. Our business in Southeast Asia, that is called Lazada, really sat down with the authorities, starting from the local level, and said, okay, where can we actually help and overcome some of these bottlenecks? So I think there's a lot that can be learned. There are definitely best practices that we can share. And I would really like to stress the importance of sitting down with the public and the private sector to identify these opportunities, because we actually see a lot of opportunities to help companies to have families move back to rural areas to start businesses. And we're talking about businesses, not only businesses that sell farm produce. So there's a lot of focus on farmers, but actually a lot of our businesses are selling goods. They're selling everyday goods. They're selling artisanal items. They're selling handicraft with a focus on clusters. And going back to one of the points that was made earlier on, this actually creates opportunities also for tourism. So we see the emergence of clusters around specific businesses that then attract tourism. And with the newer marketing technologies like live streaming, we see a lot of businesses having access to a global audience, and in a first instance to an urban audience that really wants to know. And again, the Commissioner Reinders made this point earlier on about safety. And they really want to know, for example, where their products are coming from, which again is very important when we're talking about fresh and fresh produce in particular.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Annalisa. Thank you. The point, in my opinion, the fundamental point that you have raised is how you dealt with the governments and together with them shared projects. So I now give the floor to Roger, based on what Frank just said. And he said, in Slovenia, we already organized more than 30 meetings, and we discovered, based on communities, that there was not only the willingness, but also best practices. On the other hand, we have Annalisa, who says we sat down with the governments and we helped governments to set up new ventures and walk through new avenues so that the digital could be a means of development for these communities. With you, my question to you is, what about now? What is Italy lacking? What is the province of Belluno lacking? And what lacks in other territories, in Slovenia, Portugal, or Sweden, or wherever? What we lack is really to put into practice the ideas that were voiced before. Taking for granted that in these areas, that is rural areas in Europe, Italy, etc., on the mountainous areas, we need to disconnect our investment plan from the number of dwellers, because, of course, demographic indexes are not supportive to this, because the areas are very large, but with very few people living there. This is the first point. The second point is that network policies should be dealt with by public authorities. The guarantee for a network, the guarantee for services over and beyond technicalities. And by network, I mean a satellite or the fiber or whatever. But we need a guarantee from governments, and then they have to sit down together with private enterprises and manage the set of services. During the pandemic, and I'm speaking also on behalf of the chairman of a special fund for mountainous areas in Veneto and Lombardy. During the pandemic last year, we put together a plan for extraordinary investments. And where was it concentrated? It was concentrated on providing some fundamental services, and I'm quoting two, education and health, at a very complex time as the one of the pandemic. And we realize today that in order to guarantee these services, connectivity and digital infrastructures are paramount, because if we want to keep services being provided in valleys and mountainous areas, we have to turn to telemedicine. We have to provide the opportunity to have a network for health reasons, or education, or a school from remote. This can turn out to be useful in the event of natural catastrophe. If there is a flood or a storm, etc., education must continue to be provided on a remote basis as well. Now, we have to act for these people benefits. They have to understand that whether you live in the city center of Milan, Rome, or Naples, or in a remote village, may mean having and enjoying the same level of services. And to solve these issues, we need public authorities, and we need as well the ability of becoming a network between public and private organizations. These are complex issues that institutions, public institutions, cannot solve by themselves. And if I talk about a network, it means having a 360-degree mindset. We're talking about the digital today, but the same can be said for physical mobility. That is keeping the connection with the idea of sustainable mobility, or keeping up with mobility within the valleys and the mountainous areas. And therefore, we need all the features in order to be able to provide means to these people to live there. So the rural areas call for a common action between the public and private sectors. And this is a big challenge, one of the many, I would say. And within this situation, the digital can really help us a lot. This is an element to overcome physical distance, in my opinion. Roger, on this, before giving the floor to Massimiliano, I really would like to go back to Frank for a minute, because you have said something which is really paramount. You talked about large investments. We have seen that this pandemic has opened up our eyes, and Annalisa mentioned that there is a reverse trend now, but there is a willingness by the government to make investment. Frank, the European Commission has a vision over the next 10, 20, or 30 years, yes or no? And what about the methodologies through which we can truly, truly make an impact and improve the life of these people living in remote areas? I know that there are a few projects by the European Union with the involvement of private sectors, etc. Tell us more about it, Frank, please.
Yes, first of all, on a European level, till the end of June will be prepared long-term strategy for rural areas. Last year in September, when President of European Commission Ursula von der Leyen had her own annual speech, he spent more than 5 minutes and she spoke about rural areas. And in Green Deal and everywhere are these sentences that nobody cannot stay behind other. And I think that it changed a lot in last years. The importance and understanding how important are rural areas for development of Europe is much better today than it was before COVID crisis. As we said, we need big investments, and the European Union also decided to solve these problems after COVID crisis on different way than financial crisis. Italy is, for example, the first country plus Spain who will get a lot of money also from Resilient and Recovery Fund. We also speak about these big three pillars: green, digital, resilient, and these are this way of vision for the future. And what is very important is also what you mentioned, Alessandro, how to involve the private sector in this. On one hand, we heard, and I totally agree with Roger, in rural areas sometimes it's not enough only business, because you don't have business cases, you need public support, and this public support comes from European Union, national, regional level. But at the end of the day, it is very important that business is involved, because there are much bigger investment costs than there will be availability of European and national funds. And this is also this philosophy for the future of this blending. It means loans plus subsidies and other things, and also this private partnership. And this is very important. And also in European Union, in Brussels, we started this initiative about Smart Villages Consortium, how to prepare and how to connect public and business, and prepare also models for different places. And then decision must be at home in your country and your region, in your municipality, what you need. But it's very important that we all recognize how important are these things, that we know that tools are available, and that we must be very active. And for the next decade, if we last 5 years spoke about this, for the next decade, it's important that there will be action on the ground.
These tools do exist. We need to talk about them more. So thank you very much, Frank, for your comment. I totally agree with you, and with what we are doing with the European Parliament and with the Italian Parliament, we will certainly succeed in doing something positive. I have a question for Massimiliano now. I put together a question of mine with a question that came from the audience. I'd like to understand, out of your experience, I call you out. I want to know about your personal experience. How can OneWeb allow the interests of a private business coincide with the interests of the government and of citizens? Why launch a satellite into space? How can there be a private-public partnership, a PPP, in this sector? And why is it that in other industries it is more complicated to do the same? Well, thank you very much, Alessandro. It's a great question, because, in fact, the government bet on OneWeb. They believed in the strategic importance of a system such as the one OneWeb has. And a system like that of OneWeb not just meets the connectivity requirements of people with the same covering rural areas. But obviously, the government, the UK government, has recognized that there are OneWeb is important at global level. So what happened recently? Because now, the satellite has become important, because there is a digital revolution underway, but there is also a revolution in space. Companies like OneWeb or Starlink by Elon Musk made space a bit more democratic. So now we can find solutions with which you can allow everybody in the world to have access to the internet at relatively low costs, not even relatively, I mean at low costs. something that was impossible in the past. So the UK government saw this potential, recognized the strategic importance of an asset such as the OneWeb as for space. And besides this, the UK government considers connectivity very important, but also everything connectivity can generate in terms of new jobs, in terms of development of advanced technologies, or in terms of being able to provide the message whereby we can support remote communities, not just in the UK. For instance, the UK government is discussing with other countries, and the UK government is now supporting this idea of helping other communities to be connected elsewhere in other countries. So all this technological development, job opportunities, strategic element, and obviously the possibility of being able to connect rural areas in the country, all these things together represent, I guess, many positive elements the UK government has shown interest for, basically. And it also represents a future in which we can really hope, because the whole of the Cortina Digital Forum is clearly based on the challenges and the opportunities, and also clearly on the will to provide answers to citizens. And I'd like to use these last few minutes left to leave you the floor, to each of you, 30 seconds, really just a very brief final message. But I'd like to do so starting from something which here at Cortina Digital Forum is something we strongly wanted, which was, okay, let's have a great debate, let's discuss together and let's put together the private and the public sector, but let's not stop there. And in fact, we have seized this chance of having personalities and top-level people to write a declaration, which we called the Cortina Declaration, to allow remote areas to come to the 21st century. And this declaration has a strong message that says that digital is instrumental for the rebirth and the development of the so-called remote areas. So starting from the 50% of the European territory, which is considered as non-urban territory. So the digital is a tool to talk about everything we discussed about today: precision agriculture, digitalization as an activity to improve smart mobility, digital tourism for rural areas, etc., etc. And so with this declaration, and we have two personalities here today who are very important and who strongly believed in this declaration right from the beginning, and we also have the industry, the business that endorsed this declaration, we decided to write black on white a declaration and sign it, starting from local and going to Europe, a declaration that tells us that we shouldn't stop here. So let's really take these areas to the 21st century. This declaration has been signed by the mayor of Cortina, by President Padrin, the provincial head. It's been signed by the European Parliament and by the European Senate. And it's also been signed by the MEPs of Rumra Group, that of Smart Villages, Frank representing them here today. And within this declaration, we also included some endorsements and quotes coming from the European Commission in Italy, from the presidency of the European Council, etc. And the cherry on the top, a news dating back a few days, Minister Stefano Patuanelli, the Minister for Agriculture here in Italy, decided to sign this declaration too, because he believed this is a fundamental charter. So I'd like to understand in 30 seconds from each of you, Frank, what do you see in this declaration, also in view of the presidency of Slovenia, which will come soon at the European Parliament, and in view of this, to then leave the floor to Roger. Thank you, Fran.
We need political papers, and such a declaration is political paper like it was Cork and Bled Declaration, which were signed in the past. And in this declaration, it's very clear what we spoke about. It's very important: cooperation, different levels, of authorities, business, and people. Very important are skills, and I will conclude with this, that I'm sure that we have smart people. For sure, we have also smart governments, and at the end of this decade, in Europe will be a lot of smart villages and life on the base of the concept of this smart villages concept.
Roger, to you the floor. Why is it that the declaration is important? Because to the best of our knowledge, this was the only declaration signed by Italy. So tell us more about that. What do you think about that? Because I believe that we need to be practical, to be down to earth. And you do it indeed by signing a declaration such as this one. We share good practices, and this is another fundamental element, how to test actually innovation and new practices. I come from mountains, and I'm very proud of it. People on the mountains are very practical people. They cannot just stop, and not talk about facts. And days like today are important, both in terms of the declaration, because we put black and white what we want, but also in terms of good practices. The representative from OneWeb has told us how to integrate, how to work together in various territories, fiber and satellites, etc. We feel that we have to change what is happening. We have to go back to raise an interest, a general interest, when it comes to rural areas and non-urban areas. We need to have more people going back to live there, and there is this movement today, and we have, as politicians, to turn this into a structural element. Opportunities can be indeed optimized also in remote areas, not only in Italy, but in Europe as well. If we do that, we have won the challenge you launched before. Let's make the most of opportunities and let's win over the challenge. Annalisa, we have 15 seconds. Just a statement from you as well, please.
Absolutely. We totally share the aim of the declaration. As I've said, we can achieve development, and societal development is very important in rural communities through joint partnerships between the private and the public sector. We are also sponsors of the Olympic Games that are coming soon to Cortina, so we look forward to engaging with authorities also at the local and regional level there to this aim. Thank you.
Well, fantastic, Annalisa. Thank you very much indeed. Massimiliano, to you. Well, thank you very much for being with us. 15 seconds to you too. Well, thank you very much, Alessandro. For us, indeed, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for being known at large, and so the declaration is already a good element, a very positive element, because we acknowledge the issues, and when you acknowledge issues, solutions are to be found. I truly believe that each single issue has a solution. So thank you very much for having invited me once more. And thank you all. Thank you all to all panelists. I believe that really we have made a point. We started from opportunities and we have talked about practical solutions. Thank you, Frank from Brussels. Thank you, Roger. I don't know whether you're in Belluno or Roma, but thank you, Annalisa from Brussels, and thank you to Massimiliano from United Kingdom. Thank you all.
And here we are at the end of our first panel of this first day. After Sandra's words and the words of the Commissioner for Justice, we talked to Minister Mrs. Messa, with the Vice President Mr. Castaldo, with Kasper Klinge. We talked about how digital can be instrumental to remote areas, so digital as a tool to increase the well-being and the life of people in rural areas. And And now, in short, we'll have the opportunity of hearing how digital is of fundamental importance for the health sector. In a year of pandemic, this has become even truer. But first, I'd like to thank all the guests who've been with us until now, on my behalf, but also on behalf of Sandra Alverà, who's founder and president of the Cortina Digital Forum, of Riccardo Marcucci, who's the person who really committed for the organization of this Cortina Digital Forum. We have a studio in Brussels, one in Cortina, and people get connected from all over the world. And this obviously is great. I'd like to remind you all that you can ask your questions through our website. You can share with the hashtag CortinaDF 2021 your opinion on the social media. And with this, I'll leave the floor to my friend Andrea Parola, who's going to introduce the next topic, e-health.